Man, I love the way this quartet starts off kind of quiet. And then gradually builds. What's the word for that again? Oh well. Let's see what your hosts Jeremy Burns and Matthew Scott Phillips have in store today.
Matt.
You sound tired and depressed.
No, I got this uncomfortable feeling in my stomach, actually.
Oh God. Do we have to ask for money?
It's that feeling I get when I have to ask for money.
We hate asking for money. We really do.
We do, but it is one of those things that can actually help out a lot.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is, it does cost a certain amount per month to keep this service up and running.
The undeniable truth, however disagreeable it may be.
And that money is currently coming out of our pocket.
Yeah.
And we did put out a little call to action a few episodes back, asking for donations. But hey, here's the thing. And this is part of me not wanting to put people out. This is just my nature. And I think you have the same nature, Matt, which is why this is so difficult. But the fact of the matter is, I can't stand getting email, even from companies that I like and services that I like and appreciate. I can't stand getting emails.
Oh, yeah.
Hate's a strong word. I loathe getting newsletters. They crowd my inbox. I never read them. I never do. And, of course, if given the option, I'd much rather not have to sit through ads.
No, me either. No.
And we're going to try, as of this moment, to keep this going without having to involve you guys in any of that stuff.
Yeah.
You know, because it's just a pain. And even though we're basically providing a college-level education for free.
Never thought about it that way.
Maybe we should try not to think about that as much. But having said that, to our dear listeners, we want to let you guys know that we have on our homepage, we have a donate button.
Yes, we do.
And it is up to your discretion. Every little bit is appreciated. And
and every little bit helps.
Yeah. Because it's not just a hosting service. Me and Matt really work pretty hard to produce a really good show. We use our own original music. Sometimes we have to compose it on the fly based on what episode it is.
Right, yeah.
You know,
memories.
If you listen to an hour-long episode, there's a good chance 10 to 12 hours of work went into it.
Easily.
Editing and producing and just, compressing and just making it as nice as we possibly can. So it's an enjoyable listening experience.
Yeah. And like we said, every little bit helps.
It does. And we've had a few of you actually come out and do this, and it's been, you just don't know how it lights up our hearts.
We love you from the bottom of our hearts.
We really do. And just to name a few, Doug Copes, along with your financial support, you've also gotten us in touch with Musical U, a great company who we're going to be talking about more in depth later on. Thank you, Doug. You rock.
Yes, thank you, Doug.
Anthony Artman, truly a smart man. I had to do it, I'm sorry. And a bass player to boot, so he can't be all bad, can he? Thank you, Anthony, sir.
Thank you, Anthony.
And, of course, Kimberly McEwen, and I hope I got your last name right. Along with her financial donation, she's given us these kind words of encouragement. She says, really enjoyed the podcast. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you, Kimberly. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yes, thank you, Kimberly.
Yeah.
Hope we're saying your last name right.
Yes, and actually, one or two of these people saw where they can actually do a monthly donation. So
yeah,
a couple of these people are helping us out monthly, and you just don't know what that does for us.
And we absolutely appreciate it. We ought to do something cool to thank.
Yeah, I thought about that. Maybe write a song or maybe get some coffee mugs made. I don't know, but I guess that's kind of still in the works. Either way, thank you in the meantime, and yeah. Now, of course, we don't all have money to throw around willy-nilly. When I was a student, I had next to nil cash-wise, so I get that. Good news is there's other ways to help out. You can, I don't know why, I have a few ideas why, but for some reason, when you go on to a podcasting service like iTunes or any kind of podcast feed, and you rate the show, and actually take the time to give it a star rating and maybe make a little note to it, for some reason, that boosts the presence of the episode or the show.
Yeah, I think it's designed that way.
Yeah. So that boosts the presence. So if someone Googles Ionian mode,
Yeah,
we'll come
you're
up
more
with.
you're more likely to get our discussion of the Ionian mode.
Yeah.
which is a really good discussion of the Ionian mode.
Oh, it's a fine discussion.
It's a fine discussion of the Ionian mode.
Another way is just to make, just an earnest effort to share, just kind of help us get the word out to other people who you think might enjoy it, take some time and mention it to your fellow students, your fellow musicians.
Tell your friends, like us on Facebook, share our link.
If you're in the School of Music, you probably have one or two professors that you can actually share this with.
Absolutely.
And they can share it with their students, assuming they approve, which I assume they would.
Yeah, absolutely. And keep in mind, we hate asking you for money or time. So we're going to try not to do this a whole lot.
But just know that it does take a little something to put this all together.
Yeah,
and keep it going.
it does. And, it's effectively coming out of Jeremy's pocket. I'm a complete cheapskate. So, have some pity on Jeremy and help us out.
You got the brains, I've got the brawn. Let's make lots of money. Who wrote that? That was a cool song. I remember that remember that song? You got the brain. I think it was the Pet Shop Boys.
Yeah, I remember the song. I have no idea who wrote it.
But yeah, that's basically it. I think my stomach is starting to feel a little bit better now that that's out of the way.
Yeah.
So yeah, again,
all right.
Donate if you can. If you can't, share, spread the love.
And we appreciate it.
People are responding pretty well to this information, and it's kind of spreading all over the place. So
yeah, and it's taken off, and we're excited to see that. And thank you all so much.
Yes, we can't thank you enough. Having said all that,
let's talk about music now.
Let's talk about music. Here's another one of the many things that I think we should have covered earlier on. But hey,
there's a lot of those.
Only release one episode every couple of weeks. So
well, that just goes to show you there's so much information about music out there to learn.
Indeed.
It's just a mountain of stuff.
We've covered a lot we've talked about meter and notes and key signatures, some of the things you're going to see on a musical score.
We have.
But there's all these other little things that we haven't really talked about, and we're going to try and use this episode, stuff you see on a score.
Yeah, to make it a little less intimidating, hopefully, when you see a whole lot of Italian written on a score.
Yeah, essentially, this is going to be kind of like a mini Italian lesson, isn't it?
It's going to be a little bit of an Italian lesson, it is, because Italian is just the one of the go-to languages for sort of the basic stuff. Mm-hmm. You see German on scores a lot, and you see French on scores a good bit too. And to be really, really versatile, is good to know a lot of things. But just the basic, what am I looking at? What does this mean? Things. Knowing the Italian is step one. You've got to at least be able to know some of this. So yeah, it turns into a little bit of an Italian lesson.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the main thing I started thinking about when I wanted to start this episode was dynamics.
Right?
How loud a piece of music is, and this kind of goes back to our discussion on the benefits of knowing notation versus tablature.
Right. Yeah, because tablature frequently doesn't have things like dynamics in them.
Yeah, you can get a way better idea of how the music is supposed to sound by knowing these little markers.
And dynamics traditionally indicate sort of how hard you're playing and how loud of a sound you're making. It's a different thing from volume. Those two ideas are very similar, but there's a distinction, right? A volume has to do with the amount of air your sound waves are taking. That's why when you turn up the volume on your stereo, your speakers push more air and it sounds louder. Mm-hmm. The idea of dynamics, of how loud you're playing an instrument, comes from long before we had any of that technology, right? Mm-hmm. So it really is directing you about how with how much force you should be playing your instrument, how much force you should be pressing the keys or plucking the strings or applying to the bow or whatever you're doing. It's really important to understand that higher dynamics also change the timbre of instruments. Acoustic instruments, pick up your acoustic guitar, play it really softly and play it very loud. It sounds differently. It's not just louder, it has a different timbre to it. It sounds twangier.
Yeah, more overtones seem to shine out. It's like it almost brightens up a little bit when you're playing louder.
Yeah.
On the acoustic guitar specifically.
Right, yeah. So all instruments have that.
So yeah.
But yeah, so
expression.
We've been telling people how loud to play for a really, really long time now. These go back to probably what we call the Baroque era, right? And in the Baroque era, we had, they called them terraced dynamics for a lot of interesting reasons. But the idea was you could sort of play loud or soft, and like this passage of the music would be played loud. When you get to here, play soft, and then play loud again. There wasn't any gray area really in the way they thought about it.
And if you listen to our episode on piano, you'd have a little better idea of this history. But Matt's talking about the harpsichord.
Yes.
This was actually before the piano came out, and this is kind of the reason the piano ended up becoming so important.
Right.
Because when he says terraced, he's not really joking. If you look at a picture of a harpsichord, you'll have the top row of keys and the bottom row of keys.
Right, yeah. So two completely different keyboards.
Within the same
instrument. Yeah.
And if you want to play loud, you play one set of keys. If you want to play soft, you play another set.
Yeah, because that loud set had more strings strung across it. Right, yeah. This was before the mechanism for the piano came around. So when you hit the key of a harpsichord, you've got a little lever that's got a little quill at the end, and that quill comes up and plucks the string. And so that's not really as sophisticated as when the piano forte came around, and you could play soft and loud all on one keyboard because it had this sort of hammer mechanism, these felt-tipped hammers hitting the strings, and they could be really much more responsive to how hard you hit the keys yourself.
It responds directly to how hard you hit it. In fact, there's really almost a limitless range between zero noise and as loud as that thing gets.
Yeah, and that's why we called it the piano forte, soft, loud, which we eventually shortened to piano.
Well, as long as we're talking about dynamics, because we're also going to talk about tempo and
other
accents
stuff
and stuff like that. But let's just stick with dynamics for right now.
All right.
The dynamics you'll see on a piece of music, you're going to see an italicized little lowercase p, or an italicized lowercase f.
A bold italicized lowercase letters, usually underneath the staff to which they apply. And yes, the two basic ones are P, piano, meaning soft, and F, forte, meaning loud. They don't directly translate that way in Italian. Actually, the Italian word forte actually means force, strength,
or strong. Yeah, I think fort.
Yeah. And the word piano actually means floor.
No way.
Meaning like play on the floor.
Okay.
There's probably some great historical anecdote about how they chose that word, and I don't know what it is. So somebody email us in. But in musical terms, piano, we when not referring to the instrument, we mean play softly, and when forte, we mean play loudly. And back in the Baroque era, that's the two main ones we had.
Right.
This is not the Baroque era. We have a whole bunch of other stuff, right?
The harpsichord came out back in 1397, just to give you some idea. So
wow, that's early.
About 300 years went by before they finally said, hey, let's get this piano in the mix, around the early 1700s.
Yeah, I think they were waiting on mechanical engineering and technology more than they were anything else, right?
And there's a lot that goes into those instruments, more than I ever imagined.
Oh yeah.
It's really amazing. But basically, when it comes to soft and loud, it's all really kind of indicated by the combination of these letters P and F.
Right.
Right. Yeah. So and they basically go from the softest whisper.
Yeah, which we call pianissimo.
Pianissimo.
Yeah.
Which is like very, very soft.
Very, very soft.
And then if you just want to keep on moving up, we move from that into pianissimo.
Yes, and we should say pianissimo. There are 3 P's underneath the staff.
Yes, indicated by 3 lowercase p's in a row.
Yeah, pretty much play as softly as you can.
As soft as
in general sort of lingo. Yeah.
As soft as your instrument or your voice will allow.
Right.
And still be producing music.
Right.
And then a little bit louder, we have very soft, which is PP.
Yeah, 2 P's, pianissimo.
Pianissimo.
Which means very soft. So not as softly as you possibly can, but still very soft.
Kind of like speaking in a lower voice, like whisper talk.
Yeah.
Like when you're kind of talking and you're whispering at the same time.
Yeah, right.
Ben Stiller does this really good. If you've ever seen Ben Stiller, he's the king of that. And whisper talk.
I'm Batman.
Yeah. And then getting a little louder, we have piano.
Piano. Just there's a single P meaning piano. Put a little effort into playing a little softly.
Mm-hmm. Now, as we transition from piano to forte, there's a couple of things in between.
There is mezzo piano, which is considered sort of halfway to piano.
Mezzo being half,
right?
In the Italian translation.
Yeah, mezzo meaning half, so half soft.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas piano is legitimately soft. Mezzo piano, kind of half soft.
And then somewhere we transition from half soft to half loud.
To mezzo forte, which would be an MF under the staff. Same kind of thing, sort of halfway to playing loudly. A great instrumentalist friend I know once described mezzo forte as if you were just to sit down and play normally without thinking about dynamics. Mm-hmm. That's about where mezzo forte is.
Okay. Yeah. Which I kind of related to just the regular speaking voice, what we're doing right now.
Right.
Mezzo forte and mezzo piano to some degree.
Right, yeah.
Some people have more mezzo piano to them. Some people have more mezzo forte to them.
Right.
So let's move on to something a little louder here.
Right. So forte means play loudly.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead and hit that sucker.
Like speaking in a raised voice.
Right. And then fortissimo, 2 Fs mean play very loudly. And then 3 Fs, fortissimo, generally means play as loudly as possible.
It's a funny thing that these little Fs, these kind of italicized Fs, are the same Fs that you'll see on an F hole on violin instruments.
Yeah.
Me and Matt were speculating on why that might be, and we even watched.
We have no idea.
We watched a couple of videos that might have suggested some theories, but we didn't want to quote those directly because they might just be theories.
They might just be wrong.
And there are some music people out there who are far more detailed historians than the two of us, and can shed some light on that subject.
I love telling people this all the time, but I say, contrary to popular opinion, I don't know everything. It was kind of funny. Jeremy asked me, so why is the F hole in string instruments shaped that way? And I have no idea. I really don't know. Somebody out there has to. So, please write in and tell me. I would love to learn why.
There's music history, there's music theory. I feel like we have the latter down pretty well, but we might need a hand sometime.
Occasionally.
But those are the basic dynamics.
Those are the basics. Now, you occasionally see, like, Tchaikovsky wrote 5 or 6 Ps for what was it, the Symphonie Pathétique, his bass clarinet solo?
There's a bassoon solo.
Okay, yeah. So he wrote that, and that is just ridiculous, Well, I shouldn't say that. No, I shouldn't say that's just ridiculous. Obviously, he is emphasizing a lot here how softly he wants you to play, right? Very, 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 very very softly. Right?
I'm trying to think about how a low instrument like the bassoon, how soft that can really get.
How soft can you really get before you're not even vibrating the air anymore?
Apparently at least 6 Ps.
Well, he wants you to be on the edge of that, I would think. Mm-hmm. I wonder if, like, later in the score he added that 7th P, if what would happen.
Well, I
or if he, like, took that 6 P away and, like, later in the score he says, there's only 5 Ps here, so let's go up a...
I was reading that in the case of some of the more extreme dynamics, the composer actually wrote those with the performer in mind.
A particular performer in mind.
So he's like, if I know that this cat's going to play the fiddle on this one, and I know he tends to play a little soft, I'm going to make sure, instead of saying pianissimo, he might just say piano.
Yeah, right, yeah. I have found myself doing the same thing sometimes.
Oh, yeah?
Just trying to encourage them to, just trying to, modify my markings to encourage what I want out of the performers based on their understandings. Because, obviously, this is gray area, right? I mean, mezzo forte, kind of half loud. What does that mean? Every single person is going to have a different notion, really, of what that means. This is before we had, decimeters or, down velocities from a MIDI message or anything like that. So we have to, we have to sort of think about this in very human terms.
Yeah, I would imagine it's all relative to the piece itself and the instrumentation. You know,
Yeah.
A fortissimo with a violinist and a cellist might be way quieter than a fortissimo with a full orchestra.
Yeah, and there's some good lessons that are often learned the hard way. Really don't ever give a trumpet player anything above forte unless you really mean it. Because a trumpet player's idea of forte is not necessarily a flute player's idea of forte, right?
Yeah, right.
So there can be some lessons learned in that regard sometimes.
It's very relative.
It can be very relative.
You'll hear us say that a lot in music.
Yeah. Well, this is human, and this is these things originate from a time when music was a very human art. It still is a very human art, but these ideas originated from a time when there was nothing else it could be. There was no technology, right? We like you said, we didn't have decimeters or hertz or any of this stuff. So we had to relate to what we just heard with our ears.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What was that other guy that did the extreme several Fs in a row? That was Georgi Ligeti, right?
No, actually,
Well, I think he might have too.
he might have, but what I read was that he had, in terms of softness,
Oh, okay.
he had Tchaikovsky beat by 2 Ps.
by 2 pianos.
His Etudes number 9 actually had 8 Ps.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Is that pianissimo?
We've abandoned the Italian language at that point.
We're making up our own language now.
Yeah.
Okay, well that kind of covers the dynamics, I think.
Yeah. Those are our basics. There are other things.
Well, there's also dynamics over time.
Right. Yeah.
Which we people use the word crescendo a lot outside of music.
Yeah, they do.
But it's basically Italian for
Getting louder.
getting louder. Cresting? I'm just guessing. I'm just throwing that out there.
Similar root word, probably.
Probably. Well, don't quote me on that, guys. But crescendo basically is when you have something starting off softly and gradually gets louder throughout the piece.
Right, yeah. And you will see that marked on a score either with the word crescendo in italics, not bold like the actual dynamic, but maybe italicized underneath the staff to which it applies. You may see just CRESC period. You may see the syllables of the word creche hyphen 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 sin hyphen 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 do along the whole thing that's supposed to be crescendoing.
No kidding.
Yeah, I've seen that before. I've seen that. That's weird. But definitely something you might run into. Very often you might see something that we colloquially just call a hairpin, which looks like a greater than or less than sign, or in math where it's just going from its point to its widest point over the piece of music that's supposed to be crescendoing.
It's like somebody kicked over a V from the left side
and
stretched it out to where the point is on the left side and it widens towards the right.
Right.
That's crescendo.
Yeah.
Now, and this stretch, this symbol stretches out for as long as the action
as the music is supposed to be getting louder.
Taking place, yeah.
Yeah, and if your composer or publisher or whoever is nice to you, there will be a dynamic at the end of that, so kind of just how loud.
Where to get to, where to go from.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. If there is not that, then it's just kind of your discretion how loud you should actually be by the end of this.
So if you have piano to mezzo piano,
right,
over like 4 measures, that's a pretty gradual crescendo.
That's very gradual. That's gradual enough that some performers might be a little irritated. I've probably written that, so sorry, guys.
You reserve the right to.
Maybe not over 4 measures. Maybe over 1 measure. I've done it.
Right. And then the opposite of crescendo
is diminuendo.
Okay.
Diminishing, and like I said, it's just the opposite. It means gradually getting more soft, gradually playing more softly. And you will see this again with the word diminuendo. You will see this with diminuendo with the syllables separated by hyphens like that. Weird as that is, you will see that.
Mm-hmm.
You will see DIM period, and you will also see a reverse hairpin.
Yes.
Same idea. It's just the wide part is at the top, and as you're progressing left to right, it's getting smaller and smaller down to a point. Again, if you're a composer or publisher or whoever likes you, there will be a dynamic at the end of that, giving you an idea of how softly you should be at the end. But you won't always see that. Sometimes you will just see the reverse hairpin or whatever. It's also called a decrescendo.
Yeah, right.
A DE crescendo, CRESCANDO.
And I was trying to remember which one was more common, and if there's a difference between the two of them, can we discuss that?
There is no difference.
There's no difference.
They're synonymous. As far as what is more common or not, I've never had any experience with one being more common or not. I think hairpins tend to be more common in pop music, where the actual words tend to be more common in classical music. I feel like piano music, like classical piano music in particular, tends more towards the words and may even tend more towards the hyphenated out kind of deal. That may even be a particular publisher or two that do that. Other than some sort of genre things like that, decrescendo is probably more common in popular music. Maybe, I don't know. There's no. I don't have access to any information that really talks about. The big thing to know is that they're synonymous. So whichever one you see, you'll know what to do.
Yes. Get quieter over time.
Get quieter over time. Yeah.
Now, if you're looking at a score of music, where might you expect to see these little hairpins or these stretched out greater than less than symbols?
In most instruments, they are under the staff for which they apply. In keyboard instruments, for example, piano, right? You will often find them between the two staves.
And the grand staff.
Right, on the grand staff, because the piano uses a bass clef for the left hand and a treble clef for the right hand most commonly.
Well, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Seems like it's easier to spot there.
Yeah, because you're kind of looking between those two things anyway. You're not as likely to, and it's sort of a convention that, yeah.
And in a melody instrument, you might also be reading words that go along with it, and that's kind of in the same, underneath the staff is the same little area.
If you were a singer, yeah, but actually that's a very good point. In vocal music, the dynamics often go above the stave.
Ooh.
Because the lyrics are below the stave.
Okay, well there goes my theory on that.
Yeah, sorry.
Just get an eye full and try and absorb it all in.
Yeah.
Okay, now, so far we've been talking about dynamics that kind of occur over a certain number of beats or a certain amount of time.
Right, yeah.
Let's zoom in, shall we?
All right, yeah, let's talk about some accents.
Accents on the single note itself.
Right, yeah. Well, you will definitely see, you can see an accent written as, it looks like a little bird's beak, a little vertical V over the actual note itself, a really tiny one.
So it literally is a not stretched out greater than or less than, or I guess it's a greater than symbol for the accent.
Yes.
Yeah.
And and that means effectively means play that note louder than the other notes around it, or play that note in a more accented fashion. Make that note stand out.
Da, 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 da,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, those kind of accents are used a lot to make a particular rhythmic idea clearer.
Yeah.
Well, they like to sort of highlight the meter or to highlight where particular beats are happening or something. It's used a lot for that reason.
And this is just called an accent. We don't
It's
have
just called an accent.
a fancy Italian name for it.
Nope, accent.
Accente.
Accento.
Accente.
If you really want to call it an accento,
Me and Matt are doing our hands.
Yeah, you're gonna have to do the Italian thing with your hands. Yeah.
It's like you're about to snap.
Yeah, right.
But you're just doing it back and forth.
Well, it's got that Italian hand gesture thing that means something that.
If you know Italians, you know the gesture we're talking about.
Yeah.
I'm actually half Italian. I use it for fun to be Italian.
To make fun of your family.
Yeah. And only when I'm speaking Italian. I'm not like, hey, I like some bread with my hands,
Yeah.
Give me some pan.
Yeah, Jeremy's half Italian, and my girlfriend is fully Italian. I use that gesture to annoy her And it works, and it's great.
No chicken puttanesca for you tonight, my friend.
Yeah, I don't try to annoy her when I'm hungry, but other times
she makes a damn fine chicken puttanesca.
She does.
So, when we're looking at these accents, there's a certain kind of marking for these as well, and a certain pronunciation which I have a hard time. So I'm gonna let you take it.
Okay, I'll do my best.
SF
is sforzando.
Sforzando.
Yeah, and it means kind of put. I like to think of it as kind of like a really kind of a bee sting on that note. Just bang, right? Mm-hmm. Just be really loud for just a second. You know, don't be bah for the whole length of the note. Just bang for the.
So at the top of the note, you lay into it, and then you kind of back off for the rest of the duration of the note.
Right.
A little bit.
Yeah.
Now, it seems that there are kind of 3 different symbols or abbreviations for what appears to be the same basic concept.
SFZ, SF, and FZ.
Right.
And they all mean the same thing. Pretty much whatever anybody tells you.
Yeah, okay. So before we move on from accents and dynamics and stuff, I figure I should cover one more thing. There's one little thing that can bite you, that can sting you if you're not careful, so to speak. We need not confuse if we see FP, forte piano.
Right.
But then that means forte immediately followed by
piano, yeah.
Loud followed by soft. But then sometimes you'll see PF, reverse order, which is not piano forte.
No, that is poco forte.
Poco forte.
A little loud.
A little loud, okay.
Yeah, and you'll also see poco piano, a little soft.
A little soft.
Yeah, what's the difference between poco forte and mezzo forte? Yeah, shrug. Yeah, it depends on context, really.
Mm-hmm. Brahms described the poco forte as the sound of a piano with the character of forte. Interesting.
Okay.
Maybe he's kind of referring to more of an expression or an energy level.
Yeah, I think maybe he is. Yeah. They're trying to anyway.
Great, man. Well, so there, I think that covers the dynamics,
Yep, yeah.
Now, what are some other things we're going to run into on a music score here?
Well, you will see slurs a lot. And those are just those little eyelash-looking arcing lines above the notes that sort of encapsulate all the notes under its arc, and we call those a slur. Mm-hmm. The short answer is these things are demarking phrases. So where a slur begins and ends is where a phrase is generally considered to begin and end.
Oh, okay.
What this means in practical terms depends a lot on the instrument you play. For example, if you play any bowed string instrument, a violin, a viola, a cello, or a double bass, you're typically expected to play all of the notes under one slur in a given bow. So you bow in one direction, play all those notes. When the slur changes, you bow in the other direction.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you're a composer or a publisher or somebody who's writing the music down, you've got to be really careful that you're not having too many notes under one slur and they're just bowing into infinity, right? You're gonna need a 2 mile long.
You can only make a bow so long.
Right. Yeah. Even more dangerous is in the wind instruments. The typical idea is you play all notes under a single slur in a single breath.
Mm.
So now you really got to make sure your slurs are not too long, right?
You can have wind instruments
you don't want
falling off the orchestra.
You don't want your oboist passing out in the middle of the right. In an instrument like the piano, you don't have those kinds of considerations. So that's when it really means phrasing.
Yeah.
And it's really up to a good pianist to interpret what makes these notes sound like a phrase. Maybe we play them all together and with this a little bit of dynamic motion upward in the middle or something.
When you hear about some composers such as Mozart who are kind of tricksters and kind of fun people.
Yeah.
You kind of wonder how many of them might have actually tried to intentionally write something to test the limits of their musicians.
Yeah. Oh man, what's that oboe piece? My mind is blanking. I did not drink enough coffee this morning. But yeah, there are examples of, things that are really bad like that.
Just composers kind of testing the limits of their musicians.
Yeah.
Be nice to your composers.
Be nice to your musicians.
Yeah, right. Because it might sound like crap if you give them too much.
Yeah.
Well, I imagine it also the slur also kind of helps everyone stay on the same page. Like it's giving technique kind of advice to your performers.
Yeah.
You don't want to have a violinist playing all the way through and then the cellist changing direction halfway between that. You kind of want them all to be playing in the same direction at the same time.
Yeah, as much as possible. The reality of the music doesn't always make that a thing. But in orchestral music, when you've got a whole bunch of string players and you've got to deal with this, the concertmaster will typically be the person responsible for doing all the slurs and all of the string parts.
So they are actually watching his movements to say, "Oh, he's changing now. Let me change with him," kind of thing.
Or? No, this is on the score. He will mark the slurs up bow, down bow, up bow, down bow, for all of the instruments, both violins 1, violins 2, violas, cellos, and basses. And have one guy sort of making sure they're in sync with each other as much as is possible for the music.
So they're taking their cues based on what he wrote down about his intended performance.
Yes.
Great.
Yeah. Pretty cool, huh?
Very cool.
Yeah, in like string quartets and things like that, it's less of a big deal. They can bow back and forth, as long as they're doing right. But your music is a whole entity, so you want the phrasing to make sense, right? Mm-hmm. This is really talking about how you make it not just notes on a page, but actually make it music.
Mm-hmm. And when you said slurs, immediately I kind of thought about ties when you described it.
Right. Yeah. It's a similar thing, and ties are more of a notation issue.
Uh-huh.
But ties are how you hold notes across bar lines and across beats.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, for example, if you have a note, this is a quarter note, the last quarter note in a 4/4 time, and then the same note at the beginning of the next measure in a half note, and you see that little arcing thing between them, that is tied. I mean, start playing that note on beat 4 and just continue it across that bar line.
Right? Until the half note of the beat 1.
Right, yeah.
Great, man. Very cool. And then what about the pedal? We have that in the slurs kind of thing.
Right, pedal markings. So pedal markings are for keyboard instruments. Specifically, it's for the piano. Right. Most commonly, you find it in piano music, which means hold and release the pedal with your foot. The right pedal usually is what they'll default to, unless you tell them otherwise. And when you hold the pedal down, the notes you play are sounding into infinity. Right. They're not stopping when you release the key. They're being played. And it's a great useful sound in the piano. It was probably mentioned in our piano episode.
The sustain pedal.
The sustain pedal, yeah. So you'll see a little marking PED. Yep. PED period, and that's at the bottom of the bottom staff of the piano. You'll see that, and then you'll either see a line across it, followed by a little bracketed end, which means all of this under one with the pedal depressed, and then when you get out of that bracket, lift it up. Mm-hmm. You'll also see a little sort of looks like a little star symbol at the end, which be instead of a bracket, which means the same thing. Sometimes you'll see just a line with little points where you're supposed to release and then immediately depress again.
Oh, I see.
Just to keep the notes from getting too
muddy,
raucous. Yeah,
because if you play a C chord, hold down the pedal, don't release the pedal, then play an F chord. You're in for a world of
hurt.
And here's
unless you're a polytonal composer, and then that may be exactly what you wanted.
A world of joy. The listeners in a world of hurt, but you're in a world of joy. This is a good distinction to make, because when you said pedal, I immediately went to organ. I immediately thought to myself,
yeah.
So this is not to be confused with the pedal point. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah. Not with pedal. Not to be confused with like the pedal 6/4 in theory or something like that, right? Yeah.
Where you're or like in an organ where you're holding down the actual note with your foot.
Right.
The bass
yeah.
note.
Which the that whole little set of keyboard down there that you can play with your feet on the organ is called the pedal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Or the pedals,
But this is more the sustain we're talking
This
about.
is more sustain on a piano we're talking about. With the organ, you just have a whole other bass clef that represents the pedals, and you just have notes, right? And in theory, the idea of the pedal tone as a non-chord tone, actually it comes from these notions of sustain, right? Pedal means you would sustain that note into the next chord and into the next chord and the next chord, right? It's sustained forever, sort of. But yeah, there you go.
Hey, all right.
What else is on a score?
Well, I think the only thing we really have left at this point is it seems like the most robust of the collection of markings would be that of tempo.
Oh, gosh, yeah.
And I have here like about 20 different levels of tempo, right?
Yeah, tempo is a thing that's kind of funny. Today, in this day and age, a lot of us think of tempo in terms of beats per minute. Right? Metronome markings.
BPM.
Yeah. 80 beats per minute is a faster tempo than 40 beats per minute, right?
Twice the tempo.
Twice the tempo, in fact, yeah. The metronome was invented while Beethoven was still alive.
Was it?
Yes. He actually went back and put metronome markings on all his scores.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and they're nuts. They're way too fast.
Are they?
Yeah.
I guess this is a new thing, so maybe he was...
Yeah, it was new, and, nobody's really sure why he did that. He probably didn't understand it great, but trying to play Beethoven's pieces at the metronome markings he indicated is kind of nuts. Yeah.
Kind of a challenge?
Yeah, kind of a challenge. It may have been one of those things where he put it faster than he thought it was actually going to get, so that they would play it about how he actually wanted to get it,
Mm-hmm.
Who knows?
A quick aside before we go on to tempo. Do you use a metronome when you're practicing or when you're writing? Or
Not when I'm writing.
not when you're writing?
Mm-mm, not when I'm writing.
So do you write it? Do you write the music and then listen to it, and then after the fact go in and kind of...
Yep, pretty much, yeah.
I have this metronome app that you can be listening to a piece of music and then just kind of tap what you're hearing, tap along to the beat.
Right, yeah.
And then it averages out those
Yeah.
taps and gives you the actual beats, BPM.
That's pretty cool.
And I find that to be very helpful. But
Yeah.
when I'm just sitting around playing my bass, which I don't do enough of, I'm tapping my foot. I'm not just sitting there with the metronome and saying, here's what
Yeah,
120 BPM sounds like.
Jeremy and I have the same bass player, and he was big on the foot tapping.
Yeah.
When I'm sitting around and playing my bass, I'm usually just tapping my foot myself, which is a very human thing. Of course, we're not being 100% accurate when we do that, right?
But it keeps you way more accurate than you would be having not tapped your feet, I feel like.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Totally.
Keeps you in check a little bit.
Absolutely. Yeah. But anyway, before we had beats per minute, we had Italian words that just sort of meant something vague about the tempo.
Mm-hmm.
For example, andante
Andante.
meant walking. Andare means to walk in Italian,
Yeah, okay.
and andante just means at sort of a walking pace, right?
Yep. Which is, according to this here, 76 to 108.
Which is according to that 76 to 103. Grain of salt, right? We've gone back later and decided what these mean in metronome terms.
There's some overlap in between these
And
things,
there's some overlap,
according to
there's some gray area, there's some interpretation.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, I am starting in the middle and going slow because I think that makes more sense than starting at the very, very slowest.
That's fine. That's fine.
Because,
Andante is just like a walking pace, like you're saying.
Right, yeah.
Natural.
Yeah, natural kind of walking. If you just sat down and started playing, that's probably about the tempo you would play at.
Okay.
Going more slowly than that, there is adagio, which is in the, about the 60 to 80 range?
Yeah, actually 66 to 76 is what this says.
Yeah, okay. Hey, look at that.
tight.
Yeah, so 66. There's, and there are words like adagietto, a little slowly, right?
Right. Most of these, I have a list of about 30 things, and they're all kind of variations and arrangements of these different core.
These different core things. Slower than adagio is lento, right? So that's pretty slow. That's the 50, 60 range right in there, right?
45 to 60 is what it says here.
Yeah. And then slower than lento is largo, Italian for long.
Okay, yeah. So you're stretching out something long.
Yeah.
This is kind of the 40 to 60 BPM range.
Yep.
But here's where it gets kind of squirrely, because we talked about there being some overlap, right?
Yep. Uh-huh.
This list right here kind of says lento being between 45 and 60, and then slightly slower largo being between 40 and 60.
Yeah.
So
So what are you gonna do, right? What are you gonna call it?
Yeah, exactly. There's about 5 little moments, 5 little tempos that are within both of those.
Yeah. Remember, this was originally meant to be human.
Yeah.
You know, largo didn't originally refer to a beat per minute.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it referred to a feel.
Yeah.
You know, it referred to a style of playing
Right.
that was long and drawn out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there are all sorts of tempo markings that are, you know, putting a beat per minute to it is almost ridiculous. Maestoso,
Right.
for example, which means majestically,
Uh-huh.
right?
You can't quantify majestic.
You can't quantify majestic. Grave means grave.
Right.
You know, it's slow. We get that, but you know, put a BPM to that. You know, and it's tougher, right?
All I know is it's slower than largo, right?
Yeah, it's a little slower than largo.
Because if I think if this had come out in more modern times, they might have actually put BPMs to some of these names.
Well, eventually we did effectively start. We added, you know, we said, you know, andante is about 80 beats per minute or whatever, and we started doing that. You know, we consider rock to be at about 120 beats per minute.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Kind of the standard tempo.
Yeah, kind of the
seems like.
standard rock tempo is quarter note equals 120.
And is that based on kind of the heartbeat, the human
Yeah,
heartbeat?
I think it is.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah. Which I wonder if human heartbeats have gotten faster since with all the cholesterol and
And stress from day-to-day living?
yeah.
Yeah.
Just food for thought. That's an interesting.
There's a study right there, man.
Yeah. That'd be interesting stuff to know. Anyway.
So all of you scientists, music scientists.
Music scientist. Somebody tell me whether the heart has actually gotten faster since
Put out the study.
about the 1400s.
Let us know how that goes.
So, anyway.
So grave is pretty slow.
Grave is very slow. That's very, very slow. And don't forget that there's also variations on this, like, you know, larghissimo, very largo. Right?
Yeah, okay.
Very, very long. Or, you know, andantino, just a little bit walking, you know, just a little bit of a walking pace. You know. Knowing Italian helps.
No kidding. And if you don't know it, you're learning some of it now, right?
Yeah, believe me. And you know, if we were to start at andante and gradually get faster,
Mm-hmm.
you know, there's andante, and then there's you know, things like poco andante, only a little, you know, which is, you know, a little bit faster than walking, right?
So it's in the opposite direction of andantino.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Yeah. And then we get pretty quickly to allegro.
Yep.
Right. Which is actually the Italian word for happy.
Or agreeable,
Or agreeable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Happy or agreeable, which is interesting. Allegro is about we'll call it from about 100 to 120. Yeah. Allegretto is a little allegro, which is about 80 or 90 into 100, right?
Okay.
So starting with andante and going a little faster, you know, you'll go through andante moderato, right, which is about 100-ish, 100 beats per minute.
So if andante is walking space, this is more walking with purpose.
Yeah.
Late to class.
This is late to class walking, right?
Uh-huh. You don't want to sprint in front of all those people, but you got to get there faster than just walking.
Right. After that, we get into legit moderato, around 120 beats,
Mm-hmm.
right? So about from 120 to about 140.
Mm-hmm.
We call that moderato.
Uh-huh.
Moderate, you know. You would think moderate would mean less fast than that, but, you know, pretty fast, moderately fast.
Mm-hmm.
And then at about 140, you get into allegro.
Allegro.
Which is our quintessential fast tempo, right? When somebody says allegro, they mean fast.
And that's Italian for happy, right?
It's Italian for happy. Yeah. Don't ask. I don't know.
We've also, hey, when I'm in a bad mood, I'm not hurrying around.
Yeah.
Unless I'm pissed, then I'm hurrying
Yeah.
around.
Maybe it meant more joyous.
Yeah.
Or something,
Upbeat. I think upbeat when I think happy.
Yeah. And all of these are subject to the addition of Italian modifiers. For example, allegro con brio. Means with vigor, con brio.
With vigor.
Yeah. So, does that mean faster? Does that mean allegro and also loud? It's kind of up to you.
And where do we draw the line between brio and vivace?
And then vivace. So at about 160 BPMs or so, we start talking about vivace.
Yeah.
Lively. Which is just fast.
So lively is slightly faster than vigor.
Right, yeah. You're not just vigorous, you are downright lively. At about 160 beats per minute, vivace. And then vivace is, anything after 180-ish, I would say, is going to be called presto. Yeah. Which is just fast.
Just breakneck.
It's literally the Italian word for fast.
Now you don't care what people think, and you're actually sprinting to class.
Yeah. Well, now you're running from something about to kill you.
You're not just trying to keep an appointment. You're trying to keep your life.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And again, all of these can be, you'll see allegro con brio. You'll see allegro furioso.
Furious.
Yeah. You'll see allegro ma non troppo. Fast but not too much. Right.
Yeah.
So again, all of this was. You sort of see why we decided to invent something called beats per minute at some point, right?
Yeah.
We decided to invent a metronome and be a little more accurate. But yeah.
I feel cooler and smarter saying prestissimo.
Prestissimo.
Which, by the way, is the fastest.
Right, yeah.
It's over 200 BPM and over.
Yeah, don't even bother.
But I feel like I'm getting a better sense by giving him number BPMs.
Yeah, and I think that's a product of our technological society, honestly. I think... if you would try to say beats per minute to Handel, he wouldn't have, he wouldn't have liked that. He wouldn't have thought that was telling you anything important. We may have a tendency to think, maestoso gravioso isn't telling us anything particularly important, but to Handel, it definitely was.
Right.
No.
I appreciate that.
Yeah,
I do. Now. I think we've kind of covered all the various tempos. Now let's talk about gradual tempo changes.
Right.
Because I think that's just about the last thing we have to cover here.
About the last thing, and then we'll be doing pretty good with basic scores.
Yes, sir.
So there's the accelerando.
Accelerando.
You will see it. You'll see the whole word. You will see it abbreviated just ACCEL period.
Okay.
Sometimes with a line after it. Sometimes like with a dashed line after it.
Again, indicating how long.
Yeah, sometimes just the word.
Uh-huh.
And then hopefully at some point some kind of tempo marking, and you can assume you've sped up to that tempo, right? Accelerando just means getting faster, accelerating.
Yep.
Right?
That's what it sounds like.
Yeah. Right. And that's usually above this staff. It's usually above all staves, because all instruments generally are speeding up or slowing down. Generally.
Right, together.
Together, yeah. Ritardando, Ritardando, is the opposite of that, slowing down. Again, you'll see the whole word. You'll see maybe a line, maybe a dash line. You'll maybe see it abbreviated as RIT. Mm-hmm. And that's just the basic opposite, slowing down gradually over the course of that piece of music that has been marked. Yeah, and then rubato, means playing a flexible tempo, speed up and slow down at your discretion.
At your discretion or at the conductor's discretion?
Well, if you have a conductor, at his discretion, obviously. Uh-huh. But I've seen rubato more in solo piano music, or solo music or chamber music, where it's sort of at the agreed upon discretion of whoever's there.
I guess that just takes rehearsal, because I was trying to figure out in my head how you would actually have an agreed between four people at the same time playing improving tempos. You know what I mean?
It's tough. Tempo changes in general can be tough.
Right.
But yeah, they do successfully agree upon them, believe it or not.
That's always been a little bit of a challenge for me as a bassist, as a rhythm guy. And if I have a drum player who can really do it well, then I'm set.
Yeah.
But if I'm fighting a drum player,
you kind of live in different worlds from classical musicians.
That's true.
With you, it's all about what your drummer can do.
Mm-hmm.
And without a good drummer, it's going to be nigh impossible. When you're talking about people who are sight reading, when there's nothing this prolonging the beat the way the drums do.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a different world.
Yeah, it's a scary world.
It can be,
but we can make it through.
Yeah,
we can make it through. Well, that's the time in the episode where I say well. And I think you know what that means?
Yeah, that means that at this point, if you know all of this stuff, you'll be pretty good at reading scores.
Yeah, you'll have a pretty good idea. This won't be some alien kind of
thing. At least not until you find one where everything is written in French.
Uh-oh. We'll have to do an episode on French.
We'll have to start over.
Well, the German version, the French version.
The German version and the French version, yeah.
Hey, man, we're all about the academics here.
Yeah, buddy, yeah.
Well, it is time for the recap.
The recap.
Shall I just kind of lead you through this?
Yes.
Okay, so we talked about dynamics.
Yes.
We talked about the softest possible thing being pianissimo.
Yes.
And then it just goes up. That's triple P. And
right, yeah, and then double P, and then just a P.
And then we move into mezzo piano, and then to mezzo forte.
Mezzo forte, and then forte, loud.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 Fs, fortissimo, 3 Fs, fortissimo.
Very, very loud.
Right, yeah. And people have had extremes where there's 7 or 8 Ps, but generally those are your basic dynamics.
Yes, sir. So those are the extreme dynamics. As we've learned, we can get up to 8 Ps for some of these people.
Yeah.
And probably 8 Fs.
Right.
Maybe there's someone who's done 10 or 12 Fs. I don't know. Some crazy guy.
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe not. Okay, so let's move on. Along the lines of dynamics, we also have our accents.
Accents. The accent that's just above the note looks like a little greater than sign.
Mm-hmm.
Used to bring that note out rhythmically. Play that note louder with more force.
Mm-hmm.
Make that note stand out a little more.
Mm-hmm.
We have sforzando, begin a note very loudly and almost immediately be much lower than that. And then forzando, means it's abbreviated SFZ or SF or FZ. Those all three tend to mean sort of the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's forte piano, play at forte, and then immediately start playing at piano.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get that confused. PF means poco forte,
right,
which means a little loud, right? And poco piano would mean a little soft and everything, right?
Absolutely.
And I usually just write out the word poco, P-O-C-O. That's not hard to do.
And then regarding accents, the accents are more referring to just a single note usually, whereas the other dynamics we're referring to are more the piano, the pianissimo, whatever.
Yeah.
More of a passage of music.
Right, that's more of a passage. Where accents sort of talk about a single event.
Okay.
And then there are gradual changes in dynamics. Crescendo, gradually getting louder. Decrescendo, gradually getting softer. Or diminuendo, also gradually getting softer.
All right, then we talked about slurs.
Slurs, which, the simple answer is they mean phrasing.
Mm-hmm.
If you're playing a violin, all the notes under a single slur go under one bow. In wind instruments, they're all under one breath. But in general, it means the length of a phrase. They mark out the phrasings and make it, help you to understand how this is supposed to be actual music, not just notes.
And then the pedal, not to be confused with the pedal tone.
Yeah, not to be confused with the pedal tone. The pedal marking, PED period, means hold down the pedal. And you see a variety of things that may mean release that pedal, from a little star sign to a little bracket to a little point that might mean release it and then immediately sustain it again.
Okay, now, and then I think at that point we just got into tempos.
Yeah, tempos. So from very slowest to very loudest, we have, was it grave?
You mean just kind of like bust them out and kind of
Let's
go down
just bust them out. Yeah.
the ones that from slowest to fastest,
Yeah.
the ones that I think are used the most common, right on?
Yeah, good plan.
Okay, larghissimo is the slowest possible that I have here.
Yeah.
Then we move on to grave,
Grave,
then largo,
largo,
lento,
lento.
which makes me kind of hungry for Indian food. And then we have andante, which is walking pace.
Yep, andante. Well, you skipped adagio.
I did skip adagio, I'm sorry. We have adagio,
Hmm?
which is more like a shuffling pace, maybe.
It kind of just means mildly slow.
Mildly slow, okay. And then we have andante.
Andante, walking pace.
And then moving on to andante moderato.
Yes.
Let me do my hands. Andante
moderato.
Andante moderato. All right, it makes a difference, doesn't
Yeah, it helps.
it? So that's the hurried walking, the walking with purpose.
Yep.
And then we get into moderato by itself. Moderato by itself.
Right. Kind of pretty fast.
Pretty fast. Allegro.
Fast.
Fast.
Yeah.
This is where you're running to get to class.
Right.
But in the case of vivace, something might be chasing you.
Right.
Or is that presto? Presto, you're running for your life.
Presto is just warp speed.
Warp speed? Well, no, prestissimo would be warp speed.
Okay.
Or light
so
speed.
Presto is like light speed, and prestissimo is ludicrous speed.
Ludicrous.
I think your metaphor's starting to break down.
Yeah, they are. But there's kind of the main tempo, and they obviously go anywhere between 24 BPM to over 200 BPM.
Yeah.
I'm sure there's some stuff out there that was done in 10 BPM, but...
Well, John Cage wrote a piece once that was supposed to be played over 60 years.
Oh, wow.
The tempo was so slow, it was supposed to be played over, I think it was 60 years, yeah. And
So-
like people were having to come in, and I mean, you would play a chord and then it would not play another chord for like days, right? And for a while, someone was trying to play that, and 2 or 3 people would be coming in and sort of switching out, playing it,
Yeah?
I don't think it's going on anymore.
I'm trying to fathom this, man.
I
love John Cage,
John
man.
Cage,
I love John Cage.
Yeah.
Wow, what an innovator. But at the same time, you'll be a 60-year-old man if you start listening to it when you're an infant, and you won't know what's going on when you're an infant.
Yeah, why?
And when you're
Why?
10, you're not interested. When you're 20, you might get interested, and you'll be
Yeah.
80 by the time it's done.
Why?
Because you can.
Yeah, I guess, yeah.
That's awesome. That is
Yeah. So
weird,
anyway,
but awesome.
yeah. So, those are our score markings.
Great, man. It is time for us to pat ourselves on the back because we somehow managed to get through this episode and not have to make a YouTube video out of it. Because, I mean, these are actual symbols. We kind of describe symbols,
Right, yeah.
and I think we did a pretty good job. But if you don't think we did a satisfactory job, then you can go on to musicstudent101.com and check out this episode, Stuff You See on a Music Score.
Yeah, which will probably also include some symbols.
That's where you'll get to actually see what these things look like.
Yeah.
So thanks again for listening.
See you next time.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Music Student 101, a music education podcast. Feel free to contact us at info@musicstudent101.com.